Good evening and greetings to everyone present here. I welcome you all to the technical session 9 of the Young Research Conference organized by Sarojini Naidu Centre for Women's Studies. The technical session will focus upon digital ideas, identities, and marginalized voices. This technical session will be chaired by Ms. Tanvi Suman, a research scholar at Sarojini Naidu Centre for Women's Studies. Before we start, I would like to put the guidelines before you all. The presenters will be given 7 minutes to present their respective papers. Number two, the participants can share their PPT from their end. Now I hand over to Miss Tanvi Suman to take for the further proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joiva. Good evening, everyone. I am Tanvi Suman, and it is my absolute pleasure to chair this session on digital identities and marginalized voices. As we look into this important discussion, we recognize how digital identities shape our social and political realities, particularly for marginalized communities. This session will include presentation from four scholars. And this also marks the final technical session of this two-day Young Researchers Conference 2025. And it has been an overwhelming and enriching experience listening to diverse perspectives from scholars and professionals across the globe. I'm looking forward to another engaging discussion in this session. So let's begin with our first presenter. So I'm welcoming Atling Molifi, who is a lecturer at University of Witwatersrand, South Africa, and his topic is decolonial feminism and digital activism, an analysis of reinventing online power structures for feminist movements. So, may I invite Molifi? Are you here?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Can you
Okay.
also see me? I just need to fix my camera quickly.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Thank you. I'm ready to start. Can you hear me?
Yes. 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 You are audible. Please.
Okay. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. This side is still the afternoon. As I have already been introduced, my topic basically speaks about decolonial feminism, and it also speaks about digital activism as an important tool to also try and create an incentive for women to collectivize, for women to engage in social media platforms, specifically even in conferences like this, where we are a diverse group of individuals who come from different countries, but we get to collectivize and speak about the issues that we engage in our respective countries. So the problem statement that my research engages in is the one around how digital activism is becoming more and more rife in the world, and how can we use it as a tool to reinvent like new power structures. So in my abstract and as well as my introduction, it largely speaks about the fact that decolonial feminism is when African or non-white people collectivize and they discuss issues that are not so Western liberal centered, but they try to reinvent ways and processes that places value in their own indigenous knowledge, right? So that's with decolonial feminism. We speak about how feminism has widely been used as a tool that is more central to Western or white liberal feminism, and that usually excludes non-white individuals within the process. So what women have sought to do is to basically create systems or to invent new power structures as a way of saying that because they don't have the correct financial institutions that can drive, that can support, and that can also allow them to meet all the time different spaces to discuss the issues that affect them. So they've sought to use social media as a power structure for them to come together and speak about their issues. An example of this is when, as a woman, from South Africa, I speak about my experiences and my challenges in South Africa on a digital platform such as social media or any blog. And then I come across another woman who comes from another country, whether it's India, whether it's a woman who comes from Nigeria, and then we start to the conversation and we start that sort of activism. So this is important because it has provided a platform for women to still be able to discuss their issues, even when there aren't necessarily financial institutions that allow them to advocate for those issues in person. So the advocacy now is not limited to only existing in a space where we can sit in an echo chamber, but then it also exists even on a public platform, on a social platform in that regard. So what my research does is that it explores three theoretical frameworks. The first one is decolonization. The second framework that it explores is feminism, and the third framework that it also explores is social ecology. So with the first framework of decolonization, it basically speaks about the process of undoing or unlearning the unjust by simply just trying to bring back indigenous knowledge, and also trying to find ways in which the knowledge is accessible to different people. An example of this is that South Africa has went through a colonization process, and it has also went through the apartheid system, which was a segregation along racial lines. So with this kind of research, what I aim to do within the decolonial process is to speak about the advocacy of women who have often been erased from history, where we don't necessarily speak about the contributions, the emancipation of like Black women in South Africa, or speaking about the emancipation or the advocacy of other women who exist in other parts of the world who are non-white. The second part with decolonization, it speaks about the fact that the history is often rewritten or spoken about in a more Western-leaning perspective, which then sidelines, which then becomes quite exclusive to individuals without necessarily allowing women who are non-white to also speak for themselves, to raise their voices, to advocate for themselves, and also to self-actualize. So what decolonization then aims to do is that it brings back the knowledge that has been taken away from people. What it also does is that it creates spaces that are exclusive to women who look the same, and that are also quite exclusive in a way that it allows them to vocalize their voices as well. So what decolonization as a framework being important in my research as well is that it problematizes the knowledge of saying that when we are advocating as a feminist, we always need to be quite liberal, and we always need to be quite, individualistic, because that's not necessarily what our indigenous knowledge is about. Our indigenous knowledge advocates for communitarianism, to say that we exist as a community as women, and therefore we need to be given the space to advocate for ourselves collectively without necessarily having a power structure that excludes us from the conversation. The second one being feminism. This is an important theoretical framework, especially for this topic. What it aims to speak about is to problematize and also to interrogate the fact that we need to create spaces that are quite exclusive. And in our advocacy for the spaces, we are also saying that over and above women being able to march, to protest, and to speak amongst themselves within the countries that they're in, what digital feminism does is that it also removes that specific knowledge that is quite central, that specific knowledge that doesn't recognize or doesn't even speak truly about the experiences of Black women or non-white individuals that exist within the specific perimeters of the world. In postmodernism feminism, that largely advocates for the understanding of the intersectional identities of women, to say that now you're not just Black, but you're also queer and you're also woman. So you face a myriad of issues or myriad of problems as a result of your own identity. So what feminism in this instance then does is that it is able to highlight and shape and speak about the advocacy of women. So just on the last part before I conclude with my speech, speaking about why social ecology is important, it's also important for us to problematize the environments that specific individuals come from. And we know that with feminist movements that are non-white, they're usually not funded. There's usually also a lot of problems where they even advocate for climate change. So this is important for this research project because it allows us to engage, and it allows us to also problematize how the environment that the women live in and where they engage also influence the amount of social capital or traction that they can get, especially on social media, that can also still advocate for their issues or advocate for their premises. In conclusion, this research is important because activism is a tool that can still be used even on a social platform, and it should not only be exclusive to our own peripheries of our respective countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, It was truly an enriching experience listening to the feminist movement and the experience of non-white women and their narratives in context of their lived reality, their social ecology, and how intersectionality plays a role. So we got to know so many things, and we'll take up the Q&A session after end of all the presentations. Okay, so now I'm inviting another presenter. So, an independent researcher, Anukriti Gupta, and her topic is Right to Pray versus Ready to Wait, Sabrimala Temple Entry, Agitation, and the Digital as Religious Space. So, Anukriti, welcome back.
Good evening. Am I visible and audible?
Yes, you are visible and audible.
Okay,
You
good
can start
evening
your
to
presentation.
yes, good evening to one and all present here. My name is Anukriti Gupta. I have recently finished my PhD from Center for Women Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. I received my degree last month, and my research, my thesis is titled Law, Bodies, Piety: A Study of Women and Religious Space in India, where I look at three religious locations where women were denied entry: Shabrimala Temple in Kerala, Shani Shignapur Temple, and Haji Ali Dargah in Maharashtra. Now, this paper is a part of my thesis where I look at social media campaigns run around the Shabrimala temple entry agitation 2015-2016 onwards. So, under the large banner of Right to Pray movement, the large Right to Pray movement gained traction in India when the Temple Board President of Kerala's Shabrimala Temple announced in November 2015 that if someone built a machine to detect the right time for a woman to enter the sanctum, he would consider admitting women aged 10 to 50. So we must remember that the ban was on the fertile, quote unquote, fertile age group of women, that is 10 to 50. His comments received a lot of backlash on social media platforms, especially Twitter and Facebook. Among the popular articles written by women challenging the comments by the Shabrimala temple president, Nikita Azad's open letter, which was published online in Youth Ki Awaaz, received huge waves of support and started the campaign, online campaign, with hashtag right to pray and hashtag happy to bleed. Now, before I discuss the other sections of my paper, I would like to quickly give a small introduction of the site of my study, the Shabrimala temple. So Lord Ayyappa, who is the principal deity of this temple, is an adolescent deity who is considered a celibate deity in Brahminical traditions. During the months of November, December, and January, men of all castes and southern Indian states conduct a pilgrimage and endure 41 days of harsh religious austerities. Women between the age group of 10 to 50 are not permitted to visit and participate in these um, yearly pilgrimage. Now, this restriction is based on the idea that the deity here is a celibate deity, and the exclusion is also founded on menstruation taboo, where women's bodies are considered impure and therefore not suitable to enter the religious space. Now, in September 2018, on September 28, 2018, the Supreme Court gave a judgment which removed the ban on women's entry in Shabrimala temple. During these years, beginning from 2016, two online campaigns parallelly ran on Facebook and Twitter. Right to Pray, where on one side, women advocated that it is their right to enter the temple and as believers and pray. Whereas on the other side, we have the campaign Ready to Wait, where women supported the ban on women's entry in the menstruating group, and they asserted that we are ready to wait till the age of 50 to enter the temple as believers. Now, it's interesting to see the intersection of religion, gender, and digital space in these two campaigns. Now, much of what we have read and come to know about the history of religious traditions has simply not included the history of women in those traditions. I would like to quickly mention a small example. Carla Bellami's study of Haziri at Hussain Tekri in Madhya Pradesh. Now, in her study of this particular shrine, she contends that the category of space is more important for practitioners' agency than the category of person. According to her, feminist study is trending away from the theories of subjectivity and focusing more on the theories of location and context. I would like to carry forward her argument to the category of digital space and how this was used as a form of religious expression and resistance during the Sabrimala temple entry agitations. Now, if we look at another scholar, Ruth Surya, who has worked extensively on digital space and religion and gender, according to her, women who practice within a religious tradition, for these women, digital media has become a tool or a space in which they can learn about their own traditions, negotiate it, and reframe it in their own image. Also, both challenge and support the traditional views about religion. Now, I would like to quote from two tweets to give you a brief idea of how these campaigns worked during this period. So the first tweet is on hashtag save Shabrimala and hashtag ready to wait. This tweet was written in 2018 by a man, by a believer of Lord Ayappa. He says, I'm quoting, my wife was hashtag ready to wait since 1983 when we married. I have made 40 plus yatras since then. Last 8 years, she joined me. This year, when we will go to Shabrimala on 21st and 22nd October, it will be very special yatra for us. She turns 60 on 22nd October. So here is this person who's narrating his personal story, and he's talking about his wife who did not enter, who waited till the age of 50 to enter the temple. There is another tweet by a woman believer who writes, Shabrimala is not an amusement park or a cinema hall where you can demand right of entry under the pretext of gender equality. If you don't believe in the particular tradition, you have no business visiting the shrine. Hashtag ready to wait, hashtag save Shabrimala. Now, if we look at most of these tweets which supported ready to wait, these tweets are blaming North Indian women, secular women, communist and atheist women. So attempting to categorize women in a particular category, those women who wanted to enter the temple. Now, another online campaign during this time called Save Shabrimala Global Campaign attempted to homogenize religious space through digital platforms. It raised many questions against the Supreme Court verdict. It questioned the religiosity of those women who want to enter the Shabrimala temple as believers and made defamatory allegations against those women believers by calling them atheists, non Hindus, left activists, etc. I will read a small paragraph from Save Shabrimala Global Campaign. It's from one of their posts, Facebook posts published in October 2018. So the post reads, quote, almost all Hindu women are okay with the current restrictions. The women who are asking temple entry are either atheists or from other religions. They are not even devotees. They are not going there for worship or equality or to reform Hinduism. They are simply trying to denigrate
Anupriti, kindly
Hinduism.
try winding up your presentation. It will be great. If you,
Okay, how much time
yeah,
do I have? 1 minute?
yeah, sort of 1 minute.
Okay. All right. So what I'm trying to explain by quoting this passage from Save Shabrimala Global Campaign on Facebook, that the attempt to homogenize Hindu religion. Now, what is interesting in these online posts shared under the larger Save Shabrimala Global Campaign, that there is no discussion on the absence of, there is no discussion on menstruation. There is a clear absence of direct talk around menstruation, which is central to the restriction on women at religious spaces, the concepts of purity and pollution and caste. The discomfort in engaging with the question of why a menstruating body should not be present in a religious space can be seen in both the debates. The debates organized by Ready to Wait and the debates organized by Right to Pray campaigns. The tweets and engagement, digital engagement, focused more on codifying the real tradition and discussing the law and did not focus much on the menstruating bodies of women, which is the elephant in the room. And the attempt to homogenize did not take into account geographical, social, and cultural history of this particular temple. Apart from dominant narratives around Shabrimala, there are many counter narratives which were not given any importance in these online campaigns, such as the claim by many indigenous communities in Shabrimala who reside in Western Ghats and Nilgiris, the Mala Arya communities of Shabrimala. So there is no discussion on the question of caste. and these counter narratives. Now, I would like to conclude the paper with a different approach of looking at digital space. Now, in the case of Shani Shignapur temple in Maharashtra, which is another temple which has a long history of banning women, and in 2016, uh, the Bombay High Court removed the ban and women started entering that temple. Even before that verdict came out and women were not allowed to enter that temple, they performed their religiosity through darshan. So that is beholding the deity from a distance. Now, however, darshan also became a way of controlling women's bodies and sexuality as it is allowed, but at a strict distance. I would like to take this example further to the concept of online darshan and online donations, which we see with many popular temples in India, and the same with the Shabrimala temple. So we can take the example of Shabrimala live darshans, websites, and YouTube pages, which are accessible to all genders, promoting digital darshan or online darshan and online donations. So the digital space thus constructs a complex kind of religiosity and can be seen as an extension of religious space, and where women came together but with two different opposing views, but both as believers. Um, do I have more time?
No, you don't actually. So,
Okay, so I'll end it.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Srishti, for such a wonderful presentation. And I must say, it must be difficult for you to work on such a sensitive topic due to sentimental issues, or we can say the fragile ego of people. So yeah, and we don't have much time. Otherwise, there is so much to discuss. How these patriarchal norms that restricts women from entering into temples, the nationwide agitation and protest when this Sabrimala and Sunny Singnapur issue came up, that Intriwala. And it is very interesting to know how menstruation is still considered as a taboo. So there are things, and congratulations for working on such an interesting topic. Now I'll invite our next speaker. So Srishti Kumayan, a PhD scholar from Graphic Era University, Dehradun. And the topic of their research is access, representation, and emotional resilience of Dalit women in digital learning. So Srishti, yeah.
Good
Over
evening,
to you, Srishti.
everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. You can continue.
Okay. So today, the paper I'm presenting is titled Access, Representation and Emotional Resilience of Dalit Women in Digital Learning. As we know, Dalit women hold a very complex and unique place in the Indian society as their identity stands at an intersection of caste, class, and gender, and their lives are influenced and governed by them all. They often find themselves navigating three forms of marginalization. Firstly, they are marginalized in the patriarchal structure of the Indian society, where they face the disadvantages of being a woman. Secondly, they face marginalization in the caste structure of the Indian society. And thirdly, they are often marginalized due to their class status because of the poverty their caste group faces. This triple marginalization of Dalit women in Indian society impacts their access to higher education and makes it difficult for them to succeed academically in comparison to their peers from higher castes. According to the AISHE report 2021-22, out of 4.33 crore students enrolled in Indian higher education institutions, only 7.32% were scheduled caste female students. And even when a Dalit woman is encouraged to pursue higher education by her family, a lack of resources in terms of finances hinder their education and sustenance in higher education institutions. In contemporary times, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, a number of initiatives to make the country and its education system digital have been undertaken. This surge in digital initiatives has also made the problem of access to higher education for Dalit women worse. Instead of dismantling the socio-economic divide and disparities along the lines of caste, class, and gender, it has led to an increase in such disparities. Dalit women living in rural areas do not have an easy access to technology or technological competency due to economic factors. They do not have access to the resources and technology that serve as a gateway to the world of digital learning and digital spaces, which again perpetuate cycles of exclusion and inequality in education. Lack of adequate internet connectivity, infrastructure, and devices in rural areas also hinders Dalit women's access to digital learning platforms. A transformation into digital education is a varied experience for people from different social backgrounds in India, which is shaped by their class, gender, and caste backgrounds. It then is very, very important to understand the intersection and interaction of all of these factors to understand the issues of access to education and representation in education, which are faced by Dalit women. Gender and gender roles again play a great role in the digital divide that limits the participation of women in the digital learning spaces as they face barriers in access to smartphones, internet, and computers. There is an enormous class and gender-based disparity in access to digital learning, which expands even further in the case of Dalit women who are further marginalized due to their caste. Their participation in the digital realm of Indian higher education institutions is limited by their caste identity, restrictive gender roles, socioeconomic and cultural norms, and an unequal distribution of digital resources. A rise in digital learning spaces has again not led to equal learning opportunities for the triply marginalized Dalit women. And again, there is a dire need to address these existing structural and societal inequalities that find their way even in digital learning spaces and virtual classrooms. The root cause behind the challenges faced by Dalit women in terms of access and representation in digital learning spaces can be removed by an investment in digital education, competency, and infrastructure for Dalit women, by addressing the social inequalities and the intersection of class, caste, and gender that dominates the lives of Dalit women, even in digital learning spaces. A much more inclusive and equitable digital learning framework can be developed. A report by National Statistical Office sheds light upon the availability of internet, electricity, and devices like smartphones and computers in India. And it tells us that only 9% of the students enrolled in courses in higher education institutions have necessary devices for digital learning like computers and access to the internet. And only 21% of the total enrolled students live in urban areas, and only 4% come from rural areas with a computer which has an active internet access, out of which only 17% are Dalit students. Again, such inequalities lead to an increase in psychological pressures on Dalit women and have a negative effect on their mental health. Students with a better access to digital services and facilities show better academic outcomes in comparison to the students with limited or no access to digital facilities. Academic outcomes such as retention, literacy rates, completion of higher education are all determined and influenced by the individual as well as group identity of a person. To address this issue of a vast digital divide in the country, not only an adequate digital infrastructure needs to be built, but the socio-economic as well as cultural factors that hinder the participation of Dalit women need to be addressed. Dalit women must also be provided adequate support to ensure their mental well-being in educational institution. The administrative and teaching staff must be aware of the digital limitations faced by these Dalit women, and also they should be sensitive and empathetic towards them and should ensure that the studies of these students with limited or no digital technology devices is not affected. The privileged groups in the society with control of the social resources are again more likely to have control over technology and the digital sphere than the marginalized, and they use that control to reinforce the unequal social structures, which leads to a third world divide, which is unequal in its essence and leads to unequal social and digital spaces. The limited presence of the marginalized in the digital realm is a threat to the very democratic nature of technology. And in higher education institutions, we see that Dalit women face horizontal as well as vertical exclusion and discrimination. And all of these inequalities are again and again translated in the digital learning spaces. This also makes their representation in digital learning spaces complicated as they are segregated from the majority of the academic and social culture of the university. These disadvantages faced by Dalit women in higher education institutions hamper their confidence and has a negative impact on their self-worth and self-esteem in academic settings. The social exclusion faced by Dalit women deeply affects their mental health as they face severe emotional and psychological challenges. The economic challenges faced by Dalit women also contribute to their poor mental health, and a constant struggle for basic needs create feelings of despair, hopelessness, further adding to their mental health issues. All of these challenges are again and again being replicated in digital learning spaces of the institution and contributing to the poor mental health of Dalit students. limited access to mental health support systems and resources also prevent Dalit women from receiving the much.
Could you please wind up your presentation?
Okay, yeah. So again, to conclude, I would just like to say that addressing this digital divide faced by Dalit women in Indian higher education requires not only infrastructural investments, but also systemic changes. So we need to change the system. We need to dismantle this caste, gender, and class-based inequalities. And then only we will be able to create a more inclusive digital learning environment, which is, again, essential for ensuring equitable access to education and empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Srishti, for such an excellent presentation, because to get to know about the issues of Dalit women in context of access to getting education, the digital platforms, and their struggle. So yeah, it was an enlightening session. And now I will like to call upon our last presenter, Chatali. Chatali is a PhD scholar at Jamia Millia Islamia, and her topic is Sex Work 2.0, the digital hustle, platform economics, and everyday resistance. So over to you, Chatali.
Thank you, Tanvi. Good afternoon to one and all present here. I would like to share my screen if I may be given that. Yeah. All right. Let me know if my screen is visible. Is my screen visible to you?
Yes. It is
all
visible.
right. All right. Okay. Just a minute. Yeah. Let's just minimize. Yeah. All right. So the topic of my writing is Sex Work 2.0, Digital Hustle, Platform Economics, and Everyday Resistance. And my paper largely is talking about the migration, the shift in sex work from in-person interactions to digital platforms. Digital spaces have emerged as critical sites for both economic survival and labor negotiations. While there is labor negotiations online, platform economies, while offering new financial opportunities, have also imposed new forms of surveillance, algorithmic suppression, and economic precarity. We have online platforms such as OnlyFans, ManyVids, and spaces such as Instagram, WhatsApp, Signal, and local dating apps, Tinder, Grinder. They have all become avenues for client acquisition, content monetization, and new forms of intimacy work. And how are workers sort of navigating through all of this is what my area of understanding is. The digital migration understood within the broader framework of labor precarity and financial exclusion in India specifically, and the distinction between what is legitimate and what is illegitimate digital labor, and how it is dictated by caste, class, and respectability politics, where certain forms of hustle that we see on everyday, through everyday scrolling is known as and is dismissed as cringe or morally questionable by the dominant social groups. And so my research questions are: how do platform economies shape sex work in India? What are the risks and negotiations of financial precarity in the digital labor? How do sex workers resist algorithmic control, censorship, and economic exclusion? The paper has been derived out of 5 case studies of home-based sex workers in Sangli, which is a union in Maharashtra, sex worker union in Maharashtra, and 3 hotspots around Delhi. These sex workers are especially those who have shifted to online platforms post the COVID-19 lockdown. These are informal, semi-structured interviews, and the methodology is derived from the theoretical understanding on digital labor studies, platform capitalism, and the larger feminist political economy. The paper is talking about platformization and the new economy of digital sex work, where subscription-based platforms such as OnlyFans, ManyVids have offered workers the possibility of monetizing their consent while maintaining a level of autonomy. Also platform governance structures come into question here. The policies such as FOSTA SESTA, which is Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act, which is a US policy which came out in 2018, led to sudden content moderation policies. It changed commission rates. It led to risks of account termination. So all of these were new vulnerabilities that were introduced in the picture. And many Indian sex workers also relied on these informal digital spaces because, client interactions do go beyond geographical boundaries. And particularly Instagram, WhatsApp, dating apps, these were found and found to be especially uh, doxing and harassing and issues of non-consensual content redistribution and lack of platform protection were some of the challenges that were faced in this platformization. And the key mechanisms of algorithmic control, what I say is shadow banning and content flagging. And what we mean by shadow banning is when workers posts are pushed to the bottom of the feeds and removed entirely without notification. And there's this AI driven bias in moderation that functions, where automated systems disproportionately flag content from marginalized users, including queer and trans workers. Economic suppression, PayPal, Stripe, Indian digital wallets, Paytm, PhonePe, they often categorically ban sex work related transactions, cutting off financial access. Uh, Financial precarity in the digital economy. One of the most significant shifts in the digital sex work has been the transition from cash based to digital payments now. And while cash transactions in the traditional work allowed for that immediate and direct negotiation, digital payments introduced new layers of control, new layers of surveillance, new forms of exclusion. And many workers in India face those structural barriers when attempting to sort of move to this digital space. And economic autonomy versus systemic exclusion. So, I mean, reiterating on PayPal, Stripe, Indian digital wallets, they flag transactions related to sex work, leading to sudden account freezes. They withhold funds. There are permanent bans that the workers have experienced. Criminalization and moral policing within the digital realm sort of takes us back to where we come from when we talk about sex work in India. And beyond financial deplatforming, sex workers, they have faced economic challenges such as delays, arbitrary bans, high commission fees, legal banking exclusion, and the alternative strategies that they have sort of come up with are diversified payments. They've started taking gift cards, they've started accepting cryptocurrency, they've started accepting bank transfers, they've started to, mutual aid networking is something that has come up where it's a peer-to-peer collaboration. And encrypted platforms for conversations such as Signal and Telegram are now being used um, to maintain that kind of security. The key findings that have emerged out of this is platform capitalism and financial stability for sex workers comes off as a main parameter. The rise of platform capitalism has created avenues for workers to reach broader audiences and achieve financial independence. This shift has also led to increased financial instability due to factors such as inconsistent income, lack of traditional employment benefits, susceptibility to platform imposed restrictions or bans, the role of informal digital economies in sustaining precarious labor. Informal digital economies, including social media platforms and messaging apps, have become essential tools for sex workers to advertise services. The lack of formal contracts and protections mean that sex workers operate in a legal gray area, which becomes a major problem in the Indian context when we talk about sex work. This gray area that we're not able to come out of, often without access to social security benefits or legal protections against exploitation and abuse. Digital visibility as both opportunity and risk, maintaining an online presence is crucial. But again, there's this casteist, classist, ableist gaze that the workers have experienced. And on the top of digital surveillance, harassment, potential legal repercussions, And so, taking in from some policy interventions that have happened in Belgium, Mexico, Chile, Spain, and the European Union, where Belgium has enacted a landmark law granting workers formal employment contracts and comprehensive labor rights, which includes health insurance, paid leave, maternity support, all that leads to a healthy digital working environment. Mexico's lower house has approved a labor reform to regulate the working conditions of app based workers, particularly. This also is very similar to what is happening in Mexico. And in countries like Chile and Spain, full regulation on digital platform work is also ensuring basic labor rights such as minimum wage and social security for platform workers. And within the European Union, the proposed platform work directive aims to improve working conditions for platform workers by ensuring correct determination of employment status and promoting fairness, transparency, accountability in the algorithmic management in the digital space. So, taking from here, I think the concept of platform cooperativism
Hi,
offers
Chaitanya.
viable
Could you
alternatives.
please conclude
uh,
your film?
Sure, sure. To sort of conclude, I would like to just bring in the concept of platform cooperativism that is a viable alternative to traditional for platform capitalism, where business is owned and governed democratically by workers, users, other stakeholders, ensure that those who depend on the platform have a say in its operations, and of course, implementing worker-led governance models in India, since we already we have the legal that status, would empower sex workers to have greater control over their working conditions and earnings. Establishing cooperatives or unions could provide collective bargaining power, ensuring that platforms operate transparently and fairly. Additionally, enforcing corporate accountability through regulations that mandate fair treatment and equitable profit sharing would, in my opinion, protect the workers from exploitation in the digital spaces. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Chaitali, for this insightful presentation on the topic of sex workers, their lives. So it is very interesting to know the changing landscape of sex workers with the advent of digital platforms. And you have rightly named it the sex work 2.0. And it was very interesting to know how caste and class plays a role in how they are looking into these issues. Yeah, it was a wonderful presentation. Now we'll move forward to the Q&A session. Thank you, Chetali. So after all the presentations, I would like to invite Britti to do a quick Q&A session as we are running short of time. So yeah, Britti, hand over to you.
Yeah, so I'll be dealing with the Q&A session. We have a first question to Molafe, and it is that on digital platforms, performative feminism is very rampant. Another criticism here comes is that digital activism doesn't translate into real life changes. So, first of all, do you agree with that? And if you do, what is your experience? How can we combat that?
Thank you so much for that question. So, on the first question of performative feminism, it is quite rampant. People, most sometimes allies, pretend like they are in community with the feminist when they are honestly really not. But I believe that that doesn't take away the core values of these movements and the importance or the significance of such movements. On the second question around the criticism that comes is that digital activism doesn't translate into real life changes. We have seen that this is not true as of recently, even during the hashtag movement around, men are trash or any hashtag movement. We've also seen how the issues that women are faced with, that they first started with by highlighting them on social media, have been taken into consideration, and they've also impacted or shaped the kinds of policies in society. So I do think that on the second question, I don't entirely agree with the fact that digital activism doesn't translate into real life changes. I believe that the conversations that we start on social media are very very important, and there's strength in numbers. So the more we are advocating for a specific cause, the better we are at trying to transform the policies around those issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that answer. Now we have questions for Anukriti. And the first question is, how should a secular state balance constitutional rights, specifically gender equality and freedom from discrimination, with the right to religious freedom and the preservation of religious customs, particularly when these customs appear to conflict with constitutional principles? And the second question is, menstruation is often analyzed through the lens of caste, though such perspectives remain relatively rare. In digital spaces, are conversations around menstruation also intersecting with discussion on sexuality, considering recent events like the Prayagraj Mela, where menstruating women symbolically offered an online purification bath? And how do online platforms shape and mediate such discourses? And how does the concept of purity become weaponized within the digital realm? And how do you see this in case of Sabrimala? So
Okay,
over to you.
thank you for the questions. I'll answer the last two questions together. And so I'm going to the first question by Zoeba. So, see, the debates around these three religious spaces, which I have studied in my research, Shignapur, Shabrimala, and Haji Ali Dargah, the debate is between, the tussle is between Article 14, right to equality, and Article 25 to 30, right to freedom of religion, and which also talks about minority rights. So the debate is between these articles. But if we look at how the higher judiciary, the Supreme Court, has interpreted the concepts of religion, secularism, the focus has mostly been on codifying religion and not that much or not enough on women's experiences in these religious spaces. If we look at the Shabrimala judgment, the focus is more on how Hindu religion is not discriminatory against women, and therefore one of the arguments in the judgment, and therefore the ban should be immediately stopped. If you remember the debates which Latamani describes in Contentious Traditions, or the age of consent debates in Bengal, the focus was not that much on women's sexuality, her bodily experiences, or the question of her agency, but more on religion and religious traditions and what is true religion. So similarly, there are parallel between these debates. And the best way of studying this, what you have asked in your question, would be to see how these debates have treated the Haji Ali Dargah case, where all the debates, the majority of debates, the dominant debates on social media and digital platforms supported the entry of women. And whereas if you compare it with Shabrimala and Shignapur, the reaction of social media on digital platforms, it was totally different. So there is clearly that point here. If you have to understand how in a secular country we can solve this tussle, or we can talk about this conflict between Article 14 and Article 25 to 30. The other two questions. So the question of sexuality, yes, if we look at the Shabrimala case, the onus of maintaining the celibacy of Lord Ayyappa, and also the celibacy of male pilgrims, male devotees who perform this 41-day long pilgrimage, the onus is on the absence of women's bodies. The entire aura of the temple, the idea, the notion of a celibate god, that is based on the absence of women's bodies, and her body has to be sexualized and thus segregated to maintain the spiritual discipline of the male devotees. So, as I mentioned in my during my presentation, that the discussion on digital platforms did not focus enough on the question of agency, menstruation, impurity. Also caste, because the temple entry debate started with the question of caste. If you look at 1920s temple entry movements in Kerala, caste was at the center. The ban was on the marginalized castes and the women of all castes. Whereas in these popular debates, which took place 2016 onwards, caste was not discussed enough, and uh, impurity, menstruation, these questions took the backside. the focus was more on defining what is true Hindu religion and who are the true believers and who are not the true believers. So, yes, that is my answer to the last two questions.
Thank you so much, Anukriti. And we have questions for Srishti as well. And the first question is, how do we work towards digital inclusion of Dalit women, especially in university spaces and larger scholar community? I'm sure that there are ways beyond government scholarships and etc. And the second question for her is, Dalit women often face discrimination and exclusion in digital learning spaces, which can impact their confidence and participation. In this context, what coping strategies and support systems help them build emotional resilience and continue their education? So over to you,
Okay.
Shrishti.
Thank you for the question. So to answer the first question, so while working towards the digital inclusion of Dalit women, especially in again university spaces, development of reliable digital infrastructure which is easily accessible to them. Again, financial support could be provided for devices, internet. Free Wi-Fi and digital hubs could be made available within the university campus. But I think what is most important would be, this conversation around digital competency. So, computer classes and workshops on digital skills could be given so that, first they're competent enough so that they can actually utilize all of these scholarships or, the digital infrastructure that could be developed for them. And to answer the second question, that the coping strategies and support systems that help them build emotional resilience. Again, first is there are a lot of Dalit women-led digital networks within higher education institutions. And there are many online forums, WhatsApp groups, and safe study circles and peer mentorships. They are used within university campuses by Dalit women. And representation in administrative and the teaching staff, it is very, very important, and that representation also acts as a very important support system for Dalit women in higher education institutions. And another coping strategy that that they use to continue their education is that this owning of their narratives and documenting their narratives and documenting their stories and coming forward with their stories. That is another strategy that helps them continue their education.
Okay, thank you so much, Shrishti. So, the last question we have for Chaitali, it is that in a country where sex work is still criminalized, how do you think that sex workers can stay safe in online spaces when the legal system or platform economy does not provide any sort of legal protection to them? So, over to you, Chaitali.
Right. So in my understanding, the what is doable is taking very personal and safe measures, such as using pseudonyms or using the VPN, which is a private network. And these are coming out of the experiences that I've heard and that have been shared with me. Using VPNs, using pseudonyms, peer-to-peer networking, where information is shared in groups and it stays within groups, and so the support also comes from within when it comes to any risk or any challenge that the workers face. Multiple pages, having multiple pages, backup, having that backup information ready, if the account is suddenly terminated, or platform, given the platform governance experiences that we have across the globe, to combat that, I think holding multiple pages and having that kind of backup is necessary. And also taking into consideration the experiences by collectives such as WAMP, that works in Sangli, and Durbar Mahila Samanvaya Committee that works in Shonagachi. We know that workers are also coming up with 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 conversations that they're doing on spaces such as telegrams, spaces such as Signal, which make sure of that end-to-end encryption. And yeah, so these are some things that have come to my mind, but of course this question needs a deeper analysis. And yeah, so yeah.
So I have a question, Chaitali.
Yeah,
So
sure.
what role do social media and subscription-based platforms like OnlyFans, Patreon, Twitter play in shaping modern sex work? And what are the key differences between traditional street-based sex work and digital sex work in terms of safety, control, and income stability? These are two questions.
All right. So the first question, what role do spaces such as OnlyFans and ManyVids do in the digital realm, if I may understand it correctly? So yeah, so what OnlyFans and ManyVids is doing is that it is protecting the identity and the privacy of the worker. But what it is also doing and is suppression of the identity through a larger surveillance on how it is done. For instance, if there is a larger exchange or a larger financial exchange that the space experiences, then there is sudden then there's a sudden backlash on the worker, and the worker is made to quit the platform. So we've also seen that. And the second question, if I may uh, know,
Yes,
help.
the second question is what are the key differences between traditional street-based sex work and
Work and
digital
the
sex work? Yeah, in terms of their safety control and income stability.
Right. So I mean, traditional sex work was based on cash transactions. It was direct and it was client based, and it was a negotiation that one could do directly. And there were capacity building programs that were done by collectives, that were done by unions over and over again. With the rise of the HIV/AIDS epidemic in India, there were capacity building programs that came that also assured that kind of safety and that kind of collectivization within the sex worker groups. What we see online post COVID, post the lockdown, post those physical restrictions of intimacy, is that the transaction has now become digital. It's become less safer, it's become more manipulative, and it has become strategic in the sense of surveillance and control by the dominant social groups. Yeah, so I think that.
Thank you so much, Chaitali.
Thank
So
you.
now I would like to call upon Joeba to give a formal vote of thanks.
Yeah, I'll be presenting the vote of thanks on behalf of Sarojini Naidu Centre for Women's Studies. First and foremost, I would like to thank Professor Nishat Zaidi, Honorary Director, Sarojini Naidu Centre for Women's Studies, under the leadership of whom this session is conducted. I would like to thank Ms. Tanvi Suman for chairing the technical session 9 of this Young Research Conference. Thank you. I would like to thank the presenters for this technical session. The papers you presented have contributed to the development of scholarship on the theme. Thank you. I would also like to thank the rapporteurs for this session. At last, I would like to thank all the participants of the session. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you so much, Joeba. So it was an incredibly enriching session hearing from the presenters on the topic of digital identities and marginalized voices. This marks the end of the 2 days conference. We are going for a break. We will resume at 7:20 for the valedictory address. I request everyone to be present as it promises to be an enriching session. I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.